I think the broad range of property rights issues are fairly well understood, and I think I'd like us to shift away from describing the same problems kind of over and over again and say, well, it's about time to start doing something about it. From our perspective, what the studies highlight is the need for institutional modernization. A lot of the institutions around land, typically around the world, have either been inherited from colonial structures that were designed for a completely different purpose. And in fact, many of those former colonizers, such as the United Kingdom, have gone through massive institutional modernization and reform cycles themselves. Yet that hasn't happened in places like India or throughout the sub-Saharan Africa. So when you look at a lot of those changes, they are institutional changes. They are changes around, are we efficient? Are we really servicing the client? Is there a client service mentality even, as opposed to a bureaucratic one? Context is certainly important for things like land, but interestingly enough, they're not perhaps as central as people might always make out. In fact, what I think the case studies show is even between, say, Ontario and Jamaica and South Africa, there's more commonality than there is a specific difference. There will, of course, always be differences based on local culture and norms and the way things get processed. But fundamentally, it's actually that the issues being dealt with are similar in so many ways. And a good example of that is resistance to change. In Jamaica, in Ontario, and in Australia, when you're looking to do a major change of institutions, there's natural resistance. People get comfortable with the way they do things. They may not question why they do what they do. In all cases, we've seen increased efficiency in how quickly the land registry or land authorities are able to turn around documents. So significant reductions in Jamaica, for example, by more than 2/3 of the time reduction. Being more responsive to clients. Clients know where their applications are. They don't just sort of disappear somewhere into a government office and then you have to keep coming back time and time again, which is costly both in time and money, to take time off work, to travel around the city, only to be told, come back next week and we'll tell you where your application is. And interestingly enough, in the case of Jamaica and Ontario and Western Australia, they've actually seen a direct increase in the revenue that the government agencies are collecting. So Jamaica, for example, now covers almost 80% of its entire budget through the fees that it charges. And by being more efficient, their budget when they first started in the early 2000s was somewhere around 300 million Jamaican dollars. Now it's well over $1 billion Jamaican dollars. And despite that tremendous increase in total expenditure, they've increased the amount, the percentage of recovery that they realize through more efficient processing and fees and charges. So I think that's one of the things to get people to understand, that if you become more efficient, you don't actually reduce your need. In fact, the demand grows and the transaction volume increases, and therefore it's actually a net positive income opportunity for the government. I think it's inevitable, though, that as governments progress and look at why they are less efficient than they should be in delivering property rights to people and land rights, that part of that self-assessment has to be that, you know, there is a hard job ahead, and that hard job is institutional restructuring and reform. And that means in many cases tremendous political will is required to see that through.